As the old adage goes, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. But what if you're unlucky? We've seen unlucky moments occur countless times all throughout hockey history. These mostly end up becoming blunders that could also end up becoming career-defining moments.
Racing after the puck now is Bo Bennett. Bennett down the wing into the Canadian zone, shooting, he scores!
Take Bo Bennett, for example, as that goal celebration from Bo Bennett would end up ending his entire career. Bennett's career is an unfortunate one, as he would go from a player with great promise, getting selected in the first round back in 2010, to becoming perhaps the most injury-prone player in NHL history.
Terrific piano player, too. Could sit down and knock off a Coldplay tune, and Pierre, don't ask me who Coldplay is.
Even before getting selected, Bennett would sustain a wrist injury during his time at the University of Denver, and from there, he was never able to truly get back on track. He'd make his NHL debut in 2013, and after posting 14 points in 26 games, his season would come to an end due to the same wrist injury. The following season, he'd make his return, only to this time get injured by his own teammates in practice. He'd return again and then would catch the mumps, and after all of that, come the home opener, Bennett would tie the game, and then upon hitting the boards, he would injure his shoulder, and this injury would unknowingly ruin his career. And even if it didn't, the hit he'd endure against TJ Oshie upon his return was definitely the final nail in the coffin.
Get it out, oh boy, hit by Oshie on Bo Bennett. He ran right over Bennett.
He'd try and make a comeback in New Jersey, but his injuries would flare up again, and after other attempts in both St. Louis and Arizona, Bennett would announce his retirement from professional hockey in 2021. It's moments like Bennett's that we'll be looking at in today's video. NHL players who, like him, had something in their careers occur, whether it be career-defining or not, that were just flat out unlucky. But before we go any further, this video is sponsored by SeatGeek. The holiday season is right around the corner, and a perfect Christmas gift for you or your loved one could be tickets to games, concerts, or live events. I use SeatGeek every year to attend a Flames game because they make buying tickets simple by rating them on a scale from 1 to 10, the higher number being the better of the deal, so I always know I'm getting a great deal at a great price. If you haven't already, use my promo code IDGT at checkout so you can save $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek's been a sponsor of the channel for almost 3 years now, so thank you SeatGeek once again for sponsoring today's video. Now, let's get back into it.
Suter pins him. Here comes Cousins. In front.
At first glance, this goal may seem like any other, but for Victor Mete, it was 3 years in the making. Mete was selected by the Habs 100th overall back in 2016, and was called upon during a transitioning time in Montreal. Gone were the days of being a consistent playoff threat, as the Canadiens saw many core players either hang up the skates or move on elsewhere. So, they had to start relying on their younger talent to make an impact. When Mete made the Habs roster in the 17-18 season, fans were eager to see how he would produce on the blue line, and in his first 2 seasons as a Hab, he would produce 20 points, all while posting respectable defensive numbers. Something was still missing, however, and that something was a goal, and it took Mete 127 games in total to finally put one in the back of the net. Streaks like these can be considered unlucky, but what got Mete in today's video wasn't just his story, but rather due to him making history along the way. Because of his lack of goal scoring, Mete would break a Canadiens record for the longest start without scoring a goal, breaking former Hab Mike Komisarik's record of 123 games. If you thought Mete taking almost 3 years was bad, however, how about taking half a decade? That's what Hall of Famer Ken Daneyko had to endure, as it would take 255 consecutive games to net his goal, which he would score in the 1989-90 season. luckily for Ken, he was never really relied on to produce offensively, due to a spectacular combination of defense and grit. Perhaps that was a good thing too, as Daneyko has one of the lowest points per games ever among players who have played in 1,000 games or more, rocking a .138 points per game. Already, we've talked about players setting embarrassing records for incredibly unlucky streaks, but at least they finally were able to get the job done. Try playing your entire career without scoring a goal or even a single point. Gord Streit was a defenseman for the Detroit Red Wings during the late 1950s and set the NHL record for the most games played without ever producing a point. At first, this may seem like a simple record to beat, since there have been countless players who have only played a handful of games. But what separated Gord was because, unlike the hundreds of players who've only played 1 or 2 games, Streit played 61 games in his career over the course of 3 seasons. And the craziest part about Gord is that his misfortune didn't end there. He would play in 68 games in the AHL, and while suiting up, he did manage to register 3 points, but none of which ended up being goals, meaning that in 129 games of high-level play, Gord Streit never once scored a goal. Shame, a painful feeling of humiliation or distress. This is the feeling Corey Perry felt while getting ejected from the Winter Classic, and is also an adjective many could use to describe Perry's luck as of late. Many would say that a 38-year-old making $4 million is absolutely fantastic, but perhaps winning a championship would mean just a little more to him than money. Perry was once an elite first-line winger and Ryan Getzlaf's partner in Anaheim. The two would go on to help the Ducks take home their first and only Stanley Cup in franchise history back in 2007, and Perry would win even more hardware on his own, winning the Rocket Richard Trophy in 2011, while also being named an NHL All-Star a handful of times. But like most players, Father Time caught up to him, and for the past several seasons, he's been a serviceable veteran, providing depth on the bottom 6. But while doing so, Perry still managed to make some deep runs in the postseason. Perry's journey begins in Dallas, where his Stars managed to make it to the finals to face off against the Lightning. Sadly, Tampa would come out on top, and Perry would depart elsewhere the following year, signing with the Montreal Canadiens, where he would experience another miracle finals run with the Habs, making it to his second straight finals appearance, and once again losing to the Tampa Bay Lightning, who would repeat as Cup champions. After the loss, Perry in the offseason would pull a Marian Hossa and would sign with the team who just beat him. He was hoping to help the team three-peat, but of course, although reaching the finals yet again, Tampa's luck would just so happen to run out. Because of this loss, one of Perry's teammates that year, Pat Maroon, would see a 3-year run of his own come to an end. Maroon was there for both of Tampa's championships, and he was also there when St. Louis hoisted their first cup, meaning Maroon's opportunity for a 4-peat was over. And luckily for Perry, this also meant that his 3-year stretch of bad luck would also come to an end. After remaining with Tampa for the following season and failing to even reach the final, he would sign his current deal to help be a mentor for the next NHL superstar, Connor Bedard. But going back to the word shame, it's truly a shame how Perry's latter half of his career has been defined by his 3 straight finals losses, as there was an NHL player who had it 8 times worse. 8 is a number that may haunt former NHL defenseman Pat Price. Why? Well, 8 is the amount of Stanley Cups he could have won had it not been for a handful of unique circumstances. Price was selected 11th overall by the New York Islanders in the 1975 draft. The Washington Capitals almost took him with the first overall pick, but decided to take Greg Jolly, who obviously never worked out. Price's time on the island was full of ups and downs, but mostly full of downs. He had a ton of hype during his draft year, which he failed to live up to, and it didn't help that during his time in the WHA with Vancouver, he was criticized for his lack of work ethic and laziness. When the WHA eventually merged with the NHL in 1980, during the expansion draft, the Edmonton Oilers would select Price from New York, and it just so happened that the Islanders that year would begin their 4-year stretch stretch of dominance. The Islanders would go on to hoist 4 straight Stanley Cups from the 79-80 season to the 82-83 season, appearing in 5 consecutive Stanley Cup finals, all while Price watched from home in Edmonton. Missing out on a dynasty is rough, but he stuck around with Edmonton long enough for their dynasty, right? Well, about that. Price would only last 2 years in Edmonton before getting traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Price would depart from Edmonton 2 years before they began their 5-year-long journey, where they too would also hoist 4 Stanley Cups. So it seemed the key to winning back in the 1980s was simple: acquire Pat Price and then get another team to take him off your hands.